The town of Ravens Hollow, Pennsylvania, was a place that lived for autumn. The air was a crisp, biting promise of winter, and the trees blazed in brilliant shades of crimson and gold. But for all its picturesque beauty, the town was also a place of shadows, steeped in a chilling local legend. It was the legend of the Whispering Grove, a dense, dark patch of woods on the outskirts of town where, generations ago, a reclusive family was said to have been killed by vengeful townsfolk on a Halloween night. Their spirits, the story went, never left, and on a night like this, they would whisper the secrets and fears of anyone who dared to enter their domain. 20-year-old Liam, home from college for the holiday, was not a fan of this particular brand of small-town folklore. He saw it as a quaint, theatrical bit of superstition, nothing more. But his younger sister, Chloe, a bubbly and wide-eyed high schooler, was obsessed. She and her friend Sithan, the charismatic class clown, Sarah, who was as timid as she was sweet, and Maya, a quiet, observant girl new to town, had been planning their Halloween ritual for weeks. A trek into the Whispering Grove. Liam, wary but wanting to keep an eye on his sister, begrudgingly agreed to chaperone. As they walked down the gravel road toward the forest's edge, a gaunt figure emerged from the shadows of an old barn. It was Caleb, a boy a few years older than them, who was known for his strange, solitary ways. He was the subject of countless town whispers himself. He stared at them with unnerving intensity, his eyes dark and hollow. "Going to the grove?" he asked, his voice a low rasp. "They don't just whisper, they lure." Ethan laughed, a nervous, forced sound. "Sounds like you know from experience, Caleb." Caleb's gaze fell on each of them, lingering for a moment on Chloe. "I know enough to stay away. You should, too." With that, he disappeared back into the darkness. The group dismissed his warning as the ramblings of the town eccentric, but a cold unease settled over them nonetheless. The sun dipped below the horizon, and a pale sliver of moon cast long, dancing shadows. The trees of the Whispering Grove were tall and ancient, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The forest was unnervingly quiet at first, the only sound the crunch of fallen leaves under their feet. Then, it began. At first it was just a faint, rustling whisper on the wind. It sounded like a dozen different voices, too soft to make out. As they ventured deeper, the whispers grew more distinct, more personal. "Liam," a voice breathed, soft as a lover's sigh. He froze. He knew that sound. It was the voice of his high school girlfriend, a conversation he'd long buried. "You were always too scared to tell me the truth." Liam's blood ran cold. He looked around wildly, but there was nothing. It was just a memory, a fear made real by the eerie atmosphere. A moment later, Sarah screamed. "I saw something, a shadow." "It was right there," she cried, pointing at a patch of darkness behind a gnarled oak. Ethan, trying to play the hero, ran toward the tree, shouting, "Come on, Ghosty, show yourself." But the whispers intensified, a wave of malevolent laughter that seemed to mock their bravado. Chloe's bravado from earlier had completely vanished, replaced by genuine terror. Maya, who had been silent, suddenly clutched her head. "It's my mom," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "She's telling me I should have never moved here, that I'm not safe." The group's fears and insecurities, magnified by the chilling atmosphere, began to turn them against each other. "What did you do, Ethan? Was that your prank?" Liam snapped, his voice sharp with frustration. Ethan's usual carefree smirk had been replaced by a look of sheer panic. "I didn't do this, man, I swear." The psychological torment was a slow, deliberate burn. Liam, the voice of reason, started to question his own sanity. The whispers became more specific, more intimate. "You let her go, Liam," a voice hissed, and he felt a cold hand on his shoulder. He spun around, but the space behind him was empty. He felt a wave of nausea, the kind that comes from the unraveling of a reality you thought you knew. Chloe began to cry, convinced the spirits were angry at their intrusion. Her own whispers were about her hidden fears, her jealousy of her brother's college life, her feeling of being left behind. Sarah, shaking uncontrollably, heard the voice of her dead grandmother, accusing her of not visiting her enough. Maya's whispers were the most terrifying, a relentless stream of judgments and personal attacks that seemed to expose every insecurity she had. "They know everything," Chloe sobbed, burying her face in Liam's jacket. How do they know everything? The sense of being watched, of being known, was suffocating. They were no longer just a group of friends on a spooky Halloween adventure. They were 5 individuals, cornered by their own worst fears, amplified by an unseen force. They decided to turn back, but the feeling of being watched was constant. Every rustle of a leaf, every snap of a twig, felt like a deliberate movement. They had been walking for what felt like hours, their frantic pace turning into a panicked, stumbling run. Yet the same landmarks kept appearing. The moss-covered boulder, the twisted lightning-scarred pine tree. They were lost, walking in circles. The whispers now came from every direction, a cacophony of taunts and accusations, each one aimed at a different person. "You're a coward, Liam. You're worthless. Sarah, they hate you. Chloe." Then, they stumbled into the small clearing. In the center, a circle of 5 scarecrows stood arranged like a grim audience. They were crudely made, their burlap heads stuffed with straw, but their faces were carved from pumpkins, each one bearing an eerily similar likeness to one of them. The dread that swept over them was a physical presence, cold and heavy. Liam's eyes were drawn to the scarecrow that resembled Sarah, its pumpkin face a grotesque parody of her own terrified expression. It was holding a small silver locket, the same one she had been wearing just hours ago. "My locket, .. double quotes," Sarah gasped, her voice a thin, reedy whisper. "I lost it, ... how could it be here?" Panic erupted. Sarah shrieked and sprinted off into the darkness, her scream swallowed by the forest. Ethan, screaming her name, ran after her. The remaining group, Liam, Chloe, and Maya, stood frozen, the whispers now sounding like a furious swarm of bees in their ears. Liam's analytical mind, fighting through the fear, finally took over. This wasn't supernatural, it couldn't be. The whispers were too perfect, too personal. A spirit wouldn't need a locket, it wouldn't build scarecrows. He crouched down, searching the base of the nearest tree, and there it was, a small black speaker, almost completely hidden by dead leaves. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw another, and another. A network of wires, almost invisible in the gloom, snaked through the trees. The supernatural phenomena weren't the work of ghosts. They were a meticulously crafted hoax. A twig snapped behind them, a figure emerged from the dense shadows. But it wasn't a spectral being. It was Caleb, and the look on his face was one of pure, chilling exhilaration. He wasn't a harmless eccentric. He was a predator. "You like my work?" he asked, his voice low and devoid of the rasp it had before. "I've been planning this for weeks. I've been watching all of you, listening." He confessed to planting the speakers, studying their conversations, their fears, and their secrets. He built the scarecrows, each one a monument to his twisted artistry. He even admitted to having Sarah and Ethan, and that he had been toying with them all night. He was an artist of fear, a puppeteer pulling the strings of their terror. The old legend, ... It was a story. But the townsfolk were right, Caleb continued, a twisted smile on his face. They were right to be afraid. They were right to punish the outsiders. The grove needs a sacrifice, and I'm here to give it to them. Not a ghost, but something much more real. I'm here to finish what they started. Caleb lunged, a gleam of pure madness in his eyes. He wasn't just a prankster, he was a true psychopath. He saw the group's fear not as a result of supernatural forces, but as a thrilling game he was winning. Liam, his mind racing, grabbed one of the scarecrows and shoved it directly into Caleb's path. The sudden, awkward weight of the scarecrow caught Caleb off guard, and he stumbled, his face contorting in surprise. It was just the distraction they needed. "Run!" Liam screamed. They bolted, not toward the road, but deeper into the woods, knowing that Caleb would be right behind them. The whispers had stopped. The eerie silence that now fell upon the forest was more terrifying than any phantom voice. They weren't running from ghosts, they were running from a real, human monster. The moon disappeared behind a cloud, plunging the woods into absolute darkness. They could hear Caleb's ragged breathing and the crunch of his boots closing in. Then, they heard a single, sharp sound, a sickening crack. The footsteps stopped, a deep, unsettling silence followed, broken only by their own panicked gasps. They ran until their lungs burned, finally crashing out of the woods and onto the deserted road. They never looked back. They made it out of the whispering grove, but they were forever changed. They would forever be haunted, not by the whispers of ghosts, but by the memory of a human monster and the chilling question of whether he was still out there, waiting. If you like this story, please help us grow by subscribing this channel and sharing it with your friends so we can bring you more horror and thriller stories like this. Thanks.